You're listening to The Dating Den with dating and relationship badass and best-selling author Marni Batista. Every week, you'll get the raw truth from top experts and real people on the important dating, sex, and relationship issues you want to know about. So if you're ready for true talk that's authentic and unfiltered, and you're not afraid to be called out on your stuff, then you're ready for what's next.
The Dating Den with Terri Britt. The mistakes you're making that block your ability to meet high-quality men. Ladies, welcome into the Dating Den today. I'm so excited for you to be here. Our guest, besides being an amazing coach and expert on worthiness, she told me that she manifested a man who showed up in her darkest moment on her doorstep and now has this really super cool, amazing reinvention of her life. So not only does she teach about it, she's a doer and a creator. So Terri Britt, welcome to the Dating Den.
Well, thank you for the welcome. But I have to say, I'm sitting here visualizing this den going, come on, ladies, welcome into the den.
I know.
I feel like I've got on my furs. Did you ever see the movie Under the Tuscan Sun?
Yes.
And there's this scene where the woman who is like the goddess, and she's in there being painted, and Diane Lane comes in and she's going, oh my gosh, where am I? And she's got the woman who's being painted has this skimpy little outfit, little fur boa on, and that's what I'm visualizing. Let's come into the den.
Oh my
ladies.
God,
welcome.
no! My den is I remodeled my den like a year and a half ago, so there's no. I'm not wearing only a boa, but I do have like a furry director's chair.
Oh, cool.
And my husband brought me a turntable, like what we used to call in the old days, a record player. So that's my latest passion in my den is I invested. Records are really expensive now. It's ridiculous. Yeah. So that's the latest thing in my den. So.
Oh, okay. Well, I can have my visual.
You can have your visual. Yes. Yeah. But I like it. I like it a lot. That's the beauty of the den. You can make it what you want it to be.
Yes, I love that.
Ladies, Terri is a former Miss USA, which I would love to hear more about that. She's a love expert, international speaker. She's a change agent for women. She's a spiritual coach, an energetic healer. She is the award-winning author of The Enlightened Mom, which is just an amazing concept. And she's been supporting women in raising their worthiness quotients and shifting their lives into abundance and miracles for 2 decades. And she's been on, all the shows, NBC, New York, Fox, Good Day Atlanta. And I love everything that you stand for. So let's talk about this. One thing that I always talk about, which is right up in your lane, is that we get stuck on this the hamster wheel, right?
Yeah.
And I just did this whole challenge, and we talked about being in the get mentality, right? Like, I got to get this, whether it's I got to get the guy, or I got to get the money, or I got to get the job, or I got to get 8 million Instagram likes. Let's just start right there, right? Like, talk to me about how we get on this and like how we freaking like we pull the cord like the bus. It's just like, ding, I'd like to get off. Ding.
Well, that's a great visual too, if that's what you need to do. Well, I lived on that hamster wheel, and I've done a lot of research in my own life and working with people from all walks of life. And what I've been shown is that as children, we watch our parents. If you're in the typical American family, parents tend to do everything for the kids. They're trying to make life better for them than what they had, right? It's like, I want you to be happier. I want you to be more peaceful. But what we do is we start embedding in their minds that you need to be this way to have life's rewards. You need to do this to receive abundance. And so what we're actually doing is telling our children who you are is not enough. And so we take on this belief that we're not enough. And then the second thing that happens is we watch our parents not receiving and living by a belief that I have to give to my kids, I have to give to my spouse, I have to give to everyone, and then it's my turn. So what the parents are actually doing are setting an example of it's not okay to receive. So we get both of these dynamics going on. So we grow up believing, well, I have to prove my worth.
Yeah.
And when I've finally proven my worth, then and only then can I receive love and success and happiness and relationships. Then can I have them. So I was doing that. I was doing that myself. And when you're talking about grasping and being on the hamster wheel, oh my gosh, I can remember every guy I dated, in my early days. It was like, is this the one? Is this the one? Is this the one? And I was always trying to make it happen. I was always grasping at trying to make the relationship work. And I'll never forget, I broke up with this guy that I'd been dating for 3 years. And a former Miss USA called me, asked me, do you want to go to the Laker game? And I said, yes, I want to go to the Laker game. I mean, she and I never hung out. I've never hung out with her since. But she just called me out of the blue. And I said, I am so ready to just be single. I am so ready to not be in a relationship. And that night, I met my husband at the Laker game. Is that not crazy?
Wow. What were you wearing? My God.
I just had on these, just pants and some boots and a little top. But what was so interesting is my husband, we were married for 17 years and then he passed away. But he said he saw me across the court and the guy that he was with said, that's Julie Hayek over there, who was Miss USA. She dates Mitch Kupchak, but they have an open relationship. Let me introduce you to her. And Steve he and his wife had just split. And he said, well, who's the girl with her? And Timmy, the guy with him, says, I have no idea. Well, we ended up meeting in the press club and it was a whirlwind. I mean, it was the right one. I was not in a grasping space. I was in a complete space of just loving myself, being in this amazing place in my life. I had just landed the Mazda commercials. I was the spokesperson for the Mazda car dealerships. I mean, everything was just kind of flowing. But the one thing that had not been flowing had been my relationships. And let me tell you, the guy that I broke up with, I had just broken up with him 2 weeks prior. Oh, wow. Is that not crazy? I mean, that's how quickly it happened. But here's another thing that happened. And this is funny how it's coming to me as I'm telling you this. Right at the end of my relationship with the guy, Keith, he was a graphic designer. And so we went to the big, I forget what it's called in Las Vegas. It's this big show, electronic show. Okay. Well, during Miss USA, for several years prior, I dated Wayne Newton during that year. Okay. Yep. And Wayne dumped me on my butt at the end of the year. Then we got back together and then he dumped me again. So there was this part of me that was really feeling this pain and suffering from the way he had treated me in the end, because he had told me at the end, before I gave up my title as Miss USA, you're moving to Vegas, give your car to your sister that you won. I've got cars. I mean, my whole life was centered around what I was going to be doing with him at the end of the year. And then he dumps me on my butt. So I'm like, oh my gosh. Well, as I went to Vegas to the electronics show with Keith, something inside of me said, call Wayne. So I picked up the phone and the only number that I had that was current was his security guard. So I said, I am here and this is who I am, and tell Wayne I'll be at this number for 15 minutes if he would like to talk. Literally, I hung up the phone and the phone rang and he called me and he's like, what are you doing, you little shit? Right. He's like, what are you doing? And we started talking. He says, let me send a car and come have lunch with me. So he sends the car to me and I go have lunch with him. I walk in, his dad grabs me. It's like, oh, we missed you. But when I sat down to have lunch, this whole entourage was around him. In that moment, I knew that, oh my gosh, I'm so glad I'm not in this anymore, right? Well, he walks me to the door and he hugs me and he kisses me on the cheek and he says, I want to see you again. And I said, nope. I said, if we had stayed together, I would have left you eventually. And I said, it's been really good to see you. So what was happening for me is I was really taking a stand for loving myself, but I was clearing out that old energy. And, yes. and I had to take a look and see, what did I learn from him? Right? I didn't even know anything about going in and looking at beliefs, because that's what I teach now is, where are our beliefs blocking us from receiving the things we want in our lives? And so there was just something intuitively that I knew to look at. What did I learn from him? And I looked at him as this person who taught me to kind of stand in my power. He was used to having someone in his life because he had been married for many, many years and then they had split, but he was used to having someone who was more subservient to him. And what I learned in this interim time is my uncle had become friends with his security guard, and he was out in Vegas, and he asked Wayne, so what happened with you and Terri? And Wayne said, she just had too much fire for me. Well, I did have a lot of fire, right? But so what's so cool about that is that I learned that he was not my match because I wanted somebody who wanted fire.
Totally.
Right?
I love that. And for those of you who are like, who the hell is Wayne Newton? Google it, but not right now. And back in the day, he was a hottie patati. And so I just want you to, I was like, so I just want
when you look at him now, because he's had a lot of face work and he doesn't look he doesn't look like he did. But when I was dating him, he was I think he was the number one entertainer in the world.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like I remember like Wayne Newton, like I feel like we were just talking about the records in my den. Yes. I used to have like albums of his, and back in those, I was just laughing because the photo, when the album covers, like the photos were just like these close-ups and you could see every pore in their skin. I just remember like looking at Wayne Newton and being like, oh my God, he's like beautiful.
Yeah, he had this pretty skin, and he drank. If y'all ever heard the song Dunk a Shane, he sang that when he was 14.
Oh my God. Okay, so I just wanted to let you youngsters, who we're talking about here. So I think this is an important thing because I'm always telling people when you do this, when you start to do this inside work, the exes always come. There's always, I feel like, some synergy where they like come back into your life. And I think it's the litmus test, right? And you go back and then you're like, oh my God, like this person had all this power over me and I was this different person around them. And now I see myself and I see them and I can actually say like, you're not my person. You're nice.
Yeah.
And what we had was great. But like that unhealthy sort of dynamic is gone. And I always say that when that starts to happen, you know that you've turned a corner. And you do want a person who wanted a woman who was going to be like fully expressed and I love fire. That's amazing. So tell me, I mean, like, oh my God, I just want to hear every minute of your life. But so when you met your first husband and then he passed away and then you manifested your second husband.
Yes.
So tell me, like, how did you, because I think this is an interesting thing, is when you've had a loss, whether it's someone passes away, whether it's a long-term relationship that breaks up and you get a divorce, or someone who you thought was your person disappears, or you have an unrequited thing for years and that person never commits. How do you turn around after a loss like that of 17 years and open up your heart to find your next soul partner?
That is such a good question. And it was interesting because I didn't consciously think about finding my next soul partner. What I did is, as a mom, I had a lot of anger issues because when you were talking about earlier about the hamster wheel, I was always grasping and trying to win love and approval. And I realized I was doing that in my family. So where Steve and I got together, my first husband, we were that typical humping like rabbits in the beginning. Then you have kids and it falls apart. And so I decided to heal my life, and I started doing a lot of energy work and going into the subconscious mind to look at where I was performing, where I wasn't loving myself. So I shifted our whole relationship into what I called an enlightened couple, where we were no longer looking for the world to fill us up or even each other. We were taking full responsibility for our own inner happiness, and we were growing and learning together. So I'd already been doing that. Well, 3 years before Steve died, he got prostate cancer. And he was only, when he got it, he died when he was 56. So he was 53. So when you have cancer under the age of 60 as a man, a prostate cancer, it's like breast cancer for women. It's very aggressive. If it's older, it's not that big a deal. But it was very aggressive. And he ended up having intense radiation. He couldn't have sex anymore. And I, at that time, was, in my early 40s. I'm almost 60 now. So I was feeling it. And so I said to him, that I wanted us to have the intimacy, but I had to look at myself and say, what's that new picture look like? So I started looking at where I was missing passion in my life, because I was passionate about my work, but I started realizing that our relationship, even though we loved each other and we were the best of friends and, comrades and growing together spiritually, there was just this part that was missing that was about passion. So, I always talk about the chakras and stuff, and I started diving into my second chakra, which, if you're not familiar with chakras, is right under your belly button. It's where we women, give birth to babies, where we bring in that creative energy. So I began looking at, where am I blocking passion? And as I did that, I just allowed myself to open up, started releasing the beliefs that said, no, you can't be passionate. And what was so interesting is because through that time, I was able to grieve Steve, but I was also recognizing that he was on his own journey. I'm an intuitive. And so I looked at his spirit. And said, how do I support you? His hand went up like to put a stop sign and say, this is my journey, stay back. So I had to ask, well, so what works for me? And it was to hold my vibration up, to be in a loving, joyful space for my kids, and to just keep looking at myself, just keep working on me and really loving and nurturing myself into inner abundance. So part of that was doing this passion stuff. Well, what was so interesting is for those last few years of his life, he ended up beating the cancer, which was ironic. He ended up beating the cancer, and he would spend a lot of time sharing his heart with people. He'd lived 9 lives. I mean, the guy had lived so much in his life. So it was the last 6 weeks. All of a sudden, things started shifting between us. He said yes to taking a dance class with me. We started getting more intimate not sexually, but it was more intimate in just how we were sharing our hearts and connecting even on a deeper level than we ever had. The dance class was hysterical because the dance teacher said, oh my gosh, are y'all like on a honeymoon or something? Wow. And we said, no, because so me shifting my energy around passion, it was starting to show up with my husband. Then he dies of a heart attack.
Steve.
Yeah, he dies of a heart attack. But what was so interesting for me is that I look at everything from a spiritual perspective, probably sometimes to my detriment, because I'm always seeing, the energy of things. And I sat, because we didn't know what had happened at first. I was at a dance competition with my daughter, and Steve was at home with my other daughter. He was supposed to go pick her up. He didn't show up. I called my neighbor. They found him dead in our house. So it was quite dramatic, and they had to make sure there was nothing going on as far as, any kind of homicide or something like that. So when we finally get home from this dance competition, I'm sitting in my neighbor's bathroom and sitting on the toilet, and I asked Steve's spirit to come in. I said, why now? I mean, right? Things were shifting, right? And he said, I finally let go of the controls. And what he had been doing is he had been willing himself to be there because he had had so many physical issues, and he was just ready to be done. So he had been sticking around to make sure I was at a place that I could handle it, and that I was in a place of strength and joy. And let me tell you, I was in such a good place. Of course I grieved, but I knew that our agreement was done, our spiritual agreement. Yeah, I look at spiritual agreements, and what were we learning from each other? And it felt like he had brought me, I felt like he was an earth angel, that he had brought me to the place that I needed to get to so that he could leave. We had played our parts for each other. And I did a lot with him. I mean, he was always on that hamster wheel. And, one day this was several years before that, I went into the library and I said, what am I supposed to see? I get guided to a tape. I say, I'm going to take this home. I look at it. It's not for me. It's for him. He watches it. He starts crying and he says, I don't want to be an achiever anymore. I want to be a seeker. I want to let everything go. So I gave him this gift of me walking this path of loving myself and shifting. And so he joined me on that path. And it was so beautiful because he told me a few years before he died, he said, I feel better in my skin than I've ever felt. And I said, why? And he said, you forced me to it. And I said, how? And he said, when you quit caretaking me to find yourself, it forced me to find myself. And now I feel better in my skin than I've ever felt. So isn't that crazy?
Love it. Oh my God.
I know.
I want it. I feel like I'm in your coffee shop.
You're in my den?
I'm in your coffee shop, and I'm just like, okay. I feel like, okay, and then what? And then what, Terri? Oh my God, and then what?
Yeah.
That is such an amazing story. I really want to highlight this because, again, we just did this whole challenge, and it was all about why men disappear. And when you lose someone like that, that's be gone. Right. And I have been saying, and I always said, this idea of like, if not this, something better, from the lens of like, your spirit is here to go on this journey. And when you have that paradigm that brings you this piece of like, he was here to show me something, like Wayne was there to show you something. Steve was there to show you something. And that it's always been, since you had this awakening, you shifted the focus away from what can I get and how can I get it for my husband? How can I get it for my kid? Right? Into your own self. And then there's all these, I think if we're talking about like my den, like there's little doorways, right? Yeah. And you have these awarenesses and you're like, oh my God, there's a door. I'm supposed to walk through it. But then let's tell them what happens next. When you stand at the door into what's next, what happens, Terri?
My husband now shows up.
Woo! I love it. Oh, my God. Who needs Real Housewives? We've got the Real Housewives of Terri in Georgia.
Oh, my gosh. Let me tell you.
So what happened?
So I told you I'd been working on passion, and, so what we know is that, whatever your thoughts are, subconscious or conscious, emit feelings, and those emit a vibration, and that whatever vibration you're holding is what you're going to attract to you. So I wanted to have passion in my life. I had the vision of it with my husband, Steve. I didn't know how it was going to manifest, because you don't have to know the how.
Yep.
I just kept holding the vision, right? And working on myself and looking at where am I blocking passion. I ended up painting my bedroom this deep, deep burnt orange, almost like that Italian kind of orange, terracotta orange. And because that's the color that I wanted in my, that was I wanted to manifest in my second chakra. My Steve at that time was looking at me like, you're crazy. And I'm like, no, I just know I need to do this. It feels right. And so I was expressing all of this and giving myself permission to express. Well, he drops dead. My husband now, Charlie, almost 13 years, I think it's 13 years. We got married in 2008. Yeah. He shows up on my doorstep the next day. Now, I did not know Charlie. His daughter is between my two daughters.
Okay.
And so his daughter was in 10th grade, and my oldest daughter was in 11th, and my youngest was in the 9th. So if any of you listening have kids, you know that you tend to hang out with your kids' friends and their parents because you're carpooling. And it was a huge dance team. So I did not know Charlie, but his wife had killed herself 5 years prior. So he knew what it was like to lose a spouse. He had been a single parent. He shows up on my doorstep and says, let me support you through this. Wow. Let me be there for you. And I said, okay, come on in, and I didn't really think much about it. He and I and this friend of ours, we were the only single parents on the dance team. So we started hanging out, and I was actually trying to fix the two of them up.
Oh my God.
And Charlie looked at me one day and he says, I'm not interested in Pam. He didn't say I'm interested in you, but I knew what he wanted to say. And there was starting to be a little bit of chemistry. One day he drives in, because we lived in the same neighborhood. He just lived at the back of the neighborhood. He drives up on his Harley, and I'm looking at him going, oh, what's this? I was kind of like, pay attention. It was like literally passion arrived. And I kind of kept holding it at bay, and I could feel things, and I wasn't really even thinking that much about it. And I have to tell you this thing too, because this is really crazy. My girlfriend from California, I'd lived out there for years. She says, I cannot believe you're in, because at this time I was living in Destin, Florida. She goes, I cannot believe you're living in Florida. I'm in California. We could be double dating. And I'm like, dating? What's that? And I said, Patty, how do you do this? And she goes, Match.com. I'm like, really? So that night I get on Match.com to see what is available in Destin, Florida for my future. Yes. Okay. I'm really concerned about, because I love relationship and I love being in relationship. And so like, what is there? It was a bunch of old boat captains that looked very salty. Some of them didn't have teeth. And I'm sitting there going, oh my gosh. And let me tell you what happened next. Every alarm in my house went off. And I am not kidding. It was every smoke alarm. It was like, woo, woo, woo. And my kids came running. And they're like, Mama, what's going on? What's going on? What's going on? And I just sat back, started laughing. And I said, your dad is trying to tell me something. He is trying to tell me that I need to see something. And I didn't want to say to them about dating, but he was telling me, this is not the path you're going. This is not it. And so I started getting all these messages. Ariel Ford, who wrote The Soulmate Secret, is a friend of mine. She calls me and she goes, I got to send you a book. And it was about messages from the other side. And it was literally like talking to my husband. I mean, it was so crazy, right? So I just kept being in this space of loving myself, holding a high vibration, really, because, when we want to feel worthy, we have to love and nurture ourselves, and we have to get rid of the beliefs that say, something is wrong with me. And so I just kept loving who I am and being there for my kids and just kept doing this over and over and over again. And it was being really authentic. And I'll tell you this little story. This is funny. So Charlie and I have lunch one day as friends. Okay. And he came back from a pretty conservative background, which I used to have a very conservative, but I wasn't at this point. And he starts talking about courting. Okay. Courting. He had just read a book on courting. And I'm like, oh my gosh,
wait,
who am I talking to?
Let me ask you one question, Terri, because I want to paint the picture for myself. So were you kind of friend zoning him, or were you flirting with him?
It was a fine line between. It was a fine line because there was a little energy because I'd seen him, come up on the Harley, and I love riding Harleys, and there was a chemistry, but I wasn't allowing myself to go there yet.
Okay, got it. Okay, I just wanted to paint the picture. So he was probably a little confused, and you had a little bit of a guard up, but you were attracted. Okay.
There was an attraction, but I was still trying to fix him up with my friend Pam.
Okay.
And so he and I are talking. And so one of the things that I had learned over the years is that if I am being fully authentic, if I am being fully real, that's me loving myself. So we're having lunch and he starts talking about courting. And now at this point, I'm 45 years old and my husband had prostate cancer. So we hadn't had to have sex in 3 years. And I looked at Charlie and I said, Charlie, I am a 45-year-old woman who hasn't had sex in 3 years. I am not interested in courting.
I love it. You knew what you wanted and you were clear. Oh my God, he must have been so happy.
Well, he said he put his hands in a prayer position and said, "Thank you, God." Because, there was this chemistry there, and so it was right after that. So my husband died in February. Charlie showed up the day after, and by May we had our first date. And it was so interesting because we lived in Destin, but he had a farm up in Alabama. So he comes and he picks me up in his big old truck, right? And I'm sitting there going, this is really, it was like the Harley, the sound of the Harley, which is to me is so sensual. And this truck had that same kind of sound. So I get in his truck and we start heading up to Alabama. It's just like an hour and a half drive. And I'm sitting there listening to him talk about childhood programming and how it affects your life, how it affects relationships. And I'm looking at him going, who are you? Have you been taking my classes?
Right.
And it turns out he had a background in psychology. And he was going to be a psychologist working with kids. And then he just couldn't take he's very empathic and very sensitive. So it just couldn't handle it. He just says, I can't do this. It would rip his heart apart. But so we started really merging on that conversation, right? Of where we came from, understanding the background. And that night, it was like, that was the beginning. That was when we started really, really dating, and we got married. That was our first date in May. And a year later in July, we were married.
Oh,
so yeah. But when you were talking about earlier, you asked a question and it triggered this thought. The first time Charlie kissed me, it was weird, right? Because I'd been kissing the same man for 17 years, longer than that, 19 years, because Steve and I were together 2 years before we got married. And so the first time Charlie kissed me, I remember feeling, oh, this is weird. Because we do that if we've ever had a relationship before and then we start dating, it feels very weird. And because, again, I'm always looking at things from a spiritual perspective, I checked in with my energy and I saw that I had, how horse blinders are on a horse where they are on either side of the eyes or on the outside of the eyes so the horses can't see anything else. I saw myself with blinders and I visualized taking those blinders off. It was like, I am not interested in living with blinders. I'm having this whole conversation as he kisses me.
Right.
So I take the blinders off and he all of a sudden we did it again, and he puts his hands on either side of my face. He pulls me into him and kisses me and breathes me in so that I feel the energy going all the way down my spine. And I knew.
Yeah.
I knew that, I mean, it was like this was the man. And, and we've had our, blending a family is really hard.
Yep.
It's especially 3 teenage daughters, because when we got married, they were 10th, 11th, and 12th grade. It was tough. And he came from a lot of dysfunction because his dad was the town alcoholic, and then his wife kills himself. So he's overprotective of his daughter. My kids, I've always come from the space of, I want them to fly, right? I want them to have, to deal with life. I don't want to overprotect them. I want them to deal and learn and grow. And they did. I mean, even my youngest, who's now she's 27, she'll say that one of the greatest gifts of her life is when her daddy died, because she had to learn to love herself and to walk through that and to become a healer for other people. So even though it was sad, she goes, I miss dad, but I understand what I learned. But Charlie didn't do that with Haley.
Yeah.
And he didn't have those tools. So that was tough. It was really, really tough. But there's this commitment that we have. And I will never forget, I was sitting in the bathtub when I was dating, and we were starting to date. And I was talking to him on the phone. And he said, all I know is that I was the perfect husband for 17 years, and then she killed herself. And all I know now is that I can only be who I am.
So deep.
That was the commitment we made in our relationship. And what was so interesting, a couple of years ago, Charlie was pulling angel cards, which you can tell I have a Renaissance man, right?
Yeah.
And he's amazing. So he was pulling angel cards, and he kept pulling soulmate, and he didn't understand it. It was upsetting him because it said your soulmate was coming in. He was taking it literally from what the card said. So I'm sitting on the couch. He walks down into the living room and sits there, and he's crying. And he said, Terri, he said, I kept drawing this soulmate card. I didn't understand it. It had me bothered. He said, but then as I went deeper, I realized, he says, I always knew you loved me. He said, but until you taught me to love myself, I couldn't receive your love. And now I do. So think about that. So women, we tend to we're grasping and grasping and grasping and grasping and trying to find that person in our lives, or trying to do it right, or trying to put up this facade. And we're really missing the boat, because what we're sending out energetically is we're saying, who I am is not enough.
Right.
Right?
Yeah, 100%.
Because if you're performing and you're sitting there trying to be a certain way and trying to figure out how you need to be or what you need to do, you are saying you're sitting with a low worthiness quotient. You're sitting there saying, I am not worthy of receiving simply for being me. And so you attract things to you that don't feel loving, that don't feel beautiful, that don't feel nurturing and supportive. And so what you really want to do is you got to raise your worthiness quotient. And your worthiness quotient is how open you are to receiving love, nurturing, support, guidance from the universe, simply for who you were created to be. And so to get to a high worthiness quotient, you have to commit to unconditionally loving yourself. And so that's what I did years ago when I saw my marriage with Steve really struggling, and we were both angry. I mean, we had the perfect life. We had a 7,000 square foot home in Manhattan Beach. We had a 50-foot sport fisher. We had classic cars. We traveled all over, but we were both miserable because we were both performing for each other. And so in the marriage, I was able to shift it, and we shifted together. But then when he passed, I had to stand in that energy of, I'm saying yes to love for being me. I'm trusting that I'm enough. And I had even no concept of even going out and looking, right? It was just, I was going to be there. And then I told you what was available in Destin, Florida at that time. And to then have this man show up in my life who was not only, a hunk of burning love on his little Harley, but, he's passionate, he's kind, he's joyful. He wants to grow, continually growing. He's creative. I mean, everywhere he goes, he brings joy. We just have this most beautiful relationship. But I know that I would not have manifested it if I had not continually focused on raising my worthiness quotient, meaning loving myself. I no longer performing, clearing out the beliefs that said I couldn't have passion, that I couldn't have this kind of deep connection. So I did the work, and then it showed up in my life. It wasn't grasping. It was just me doing the inner work.
I love that. Oh my gosh. Well, I don't know about what if your book tells all this story as an enlightened mom, but what I do know is your energy and your passion are so what's the right word? Tangible. And I love this message because I think that that's what I've kind of been sharing lately, and I think the universe brought you here just for that. Is that pull the cord, ding. Get off the hamster wheel, focus inward. And I love this idea about the worthiness quotient. Okay, last question. So if you were going to sort of say like, I wrote it down. What am I blocking? Right? How am I blocking myself from? Like, is if our listeners are going to kind of walk away with one question to ponder to start them on the path of raising their worthiness question, or quotient, what would that question be that they can start to ask themselves?
Where am I performing? Because that's what we're programmed to believe. And so a lot of times, our subconscious mind runs 95% of our lives. So we don't even know, right? We don't even know where we're performing. All we know is that we feel emotional. And so your feelings are your guide to take you to the belief that is causing you to perform. And also, you mentioned my Enlightened Mom book. My Women Leaders of Love ebook is part of my Worthiness Quotient Breakthrough Bundle. It's totally free. That's a great, it's a great ebook for people to grab that will take them through the steps to really start loving themselves, because this is what I want to plant the seed with for everyone. When we're grasping at trying to have a relationship, we're being the follower. We want to be the leaders. I became the woman leader of love in my relationship with my late husband, and I stood in that energy with my husband now, who now is really prospering in every area of his life. So we want to be that. So I want you to think of it as when you stop performing, you take back the authority of your life and you become a woman leader of love. So I want everyone here to think about that, because this is not about being the wounded child who is seeking somebody to love her. No, be that woman leader of love to your inner child, which I talk about all this in the ebook. And y'all can get it at terribritt.com/leaders. But you become that parent to that inner child. And so whatever you're searching for in a relationship, you create that connection with your inner child and love that little kid and shift your energy, shift your vibration, so that now you're the leader and you're holding a vibration that is so high, that is so worthy, that now you attract a man or a person in your life who is going to match that vibration. And that's what we want to do. Okay? It's not about grasping.
Yes.
It's about matching the vibration.
Stop grasping, because if you have long nails, number one, you'll break them.
Yes.
And if you don't have long nails, you're going to get little finger calluses, and that's not fun either. Terri, I love it. Ladies, a link to all things Terri Britt are in the show notes. You are a goddess. I have like 7 other questions I never even got to ask you, so I hope you can come back into the den.
I would love to.
Awesome. I have so enjoyed every single thing. Ladies, raise that worthiness quotient, and when you're doing it, do it with some damn dignity. We'll see you next time in the den. Bye-bye for now.
Bye, everybody.
Hey, thanks for tuning into today's show. So if being in an intimate relationship in which you feel 100% seen, heard, and accepted by a high caliber man is a priority for you right now, and you're interested in seeing if you're a fit for working with me and my team at Dating with Dignity, here's what I want you to do. Just head over to DWD VIP, that's D as in dating, W, D as in dating, VIP.com, and book a call to speak with my team. We'll get on the phone with you for about 60 minutes, and you'll get crystal clear on what's stopping you from finding true love right now. We'll also take a look at what you want to create, what you want your whole life to look like when you're able to finally be fully expressed as a woman in a healthy relationship with an incredible guy. And if we can help you get from where you are right now to where you want to be, we will show you the fastest path possible that makes sense for you to do that. We help smart, successful women all over the world solve this one missing piece in their life so they can finally have it all. So to see if we can help you do the same thing, head over to DWDVIP.com. I'm Marni Batista, and let's talk soon.